Hi, welcome back to Trucker Mommy. If you're new here, welcome. Please hit that subscribe button. Please like and share this video and comment down below. I love hearing from you. Sorry, my baby's being screechy. Yes? It's her nap time. I probably should have waited until she's actually asleep to start this. But I don't know when that'll be, so let's try something out today. But it's not working. Oh well. I'll just take her out. So today I wanted to follow up on an earlier video I did about mental health because I keep getting questions about that. Now, please keep in mind, I am not a mental health professional. I'm a student in my undergrad studying psychology. So what that means is even once I graduate with my undergrad, I still can't treat people. In order to treat people with a psychology degree, I would need to get my doctorate. So I don't even know if I'm going to pursue that at this point. But what I can tell you is the things that I've studied about, the things that I know. That's what I can talk about. So one thing I wanted to talk about is there's still a lot of stigma behind mental illness, and I don't know if that'll ever go away. It's gotten better, I feel like, over the years, but it's still pretty bad. And I think one of the common kind of misconceptions about it is, especially now, if you're not part of a church, maybe just gloss over this. Maybe just stop watching or whatever. This might not be relevant to you. But I think a common misconception for people who are, say, Christian, is that if you're a good enough Christian, you're not going to have mental illness, right? I want to tell you, that's not how it works. Like, we wouldn't say that if you're a good enough Christian, you won't have diabetes, right? Or if you're good enough Christian, you'll never break your leg if you fall down on the ice or something, right? It doesn't make logical sense. The brain is actually an organ in our body. It controls our body, and it's primarily made of what? Muscle, right? Muscle tissue. So and a whole lot of other things too, but it's not a spiritual organ. You know what I mean? Like, the brain can get disease just like our heart can have disease. Our lungs can get things like pneumonia and things like that. Our brain can also have problems. They're not always mental health problems. They can have like bleeding on the brain. The brain can get cancer, things like that. So mental illness is tricky because a lot of people think, well, it's not actually physically present in the brain. Like, there's no way to actually see it on the brain. Actually, that's not true, because of something that we have now called a functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. We can actually see mental illness now, or at least patterns. We can see patterns of the brain that are consistent with different mental illnesses, and we can also see when a brain is more or less healthy, right? So we can see those things and we can compare and we can say, yep, this person is consistent with depression or borderline personality disorder or things like that. We can see that, but the problem is functional MRIs are quite costly to carry out, and that is not the standard diagnostic tool used to say that somebody has this or that mental illness. We don't use functional MRIs for those kinds of things. We use functional MRIs, or fMRIs, sorry, we use it primarily in research for mental illness at this stage. So now it is used for some things, like, say, in the US, I know the other places in the world, we call football something, it's a different game. In the US, football, we use a different kind of ball than everybody else, and we play it differently. We call football that the rest of the world calls, we call soccer, right? So I'm talking about American football. Players often have a lot of head injuries, concussions and things, and that can cause major issues for them down the line. And that they often use functional MRIs, I believe, for that, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. So I'm just trying to say, for example, sometimes they are used for some things, but that is not standard for checking for mental illness. But we can see it because there's different structures within the brain that are called like circuits or networks that work together to form different not form different things, but to carry out different functions. And so we can see, for example, for somebody who has depression, there are parts of the brain that on a fMRI, there are certain areas of the brain that for somebody who is not depressed, those areas will light up, versus somebody who is depressed, those areas might be not lighting up. Like there's not brain activity in those areas because this person is depressed. And there are certain areas of the brain where, with somebody with a healthy brain, some areas might light up less, versus somebody who's depressed, maybe it's more active. Based on like what that part of the brain does. Like the part that processes like negative emotions, for somebody who's depressed, it might light up more. For somebody who's not, the part of the brain that processes like positive things might light up more. Now, I don't have research in front of me. I'm not following a script. I'm just talking right now. So whatever I say, please take it with a grain of salt. I have done a lot of research, and I have read a lot of books and studies and things, and I have learned that you can only like use something as, like, if you're talking about science, it's best to back it up with actual info. I'm not doing that here. So I'm just talking about things that that come to mind. I'm so sorry. She's being so loud. But the point is, like, mental illness, it is a real physical problem that occurs in a person's brain. Just give me a sec. Sorry. I think she's hungry. It is a real physical problem that can be seen on scans, and that can show up in a physical way. So that I wanted to get out there. That's the point of this whole long rant or whatever that I just talked about. Mental illness can show up in, like, physically on something. Now, you all might not know what is a functional magnetic resonance imaging. So an MRI is something they use magnets to take pictures of whatever it is they're taking pictures, whether it's the brain or the neck or the shoulders or whatever body part, right, they want to take pictures of. And so in a functional MRI, the person who's inside this machine is given certain tasks to do, and then they take pictures while this person is doing those things. So that, in my understanding, that's how that works. So that's how we know that different parts of the brain kind of have their own little jobs to do. And so when the brain's not doing their job, then there's a problem. So that's how we know that. And so it's not really like a diagnostic tool. It's more of like a confirmation of things that we already know, because we already know when somebody's not feeling well because they can tell us. So it's really interesting though. And I do have books and things I could tell you about. Some of them are textbooks that I've had to read for school. But I have other books that I have read just on my own that I have copies of that I should bring down and show you guys so that you know what I'm talking about if you want to look into it yourself. So, sorry. So this is important though. It's really, really important to understand that when someone's not feeling well, there is an actual legitimate reason why they're not feeling well. And when it comes to mental illness. And the other thing to keep in mind is that there are many different causes of mental illness. There are many, many different causes. I think a lot of people are more aware now of something called post-traumatic stress disorder, which is most, maybe, I shouldn't say common, but most, like more people know about it because of veterans, people who have been in, say, active war zone. I'm so sorry. It's just so loud. This baby is just so loud. Anyway, post-traumatic stress disorder. Soldiers who go to war and then they come back and now they have nightmares and stuff of being back in their war zone and things like that. I don't know, maybe that's not as common everywhere as I'm giving it credit, but that's one type of mental illness that can happen that, of course, we know the cause was going to an active war zone, right? There are other causes too, though, and there's other things that it might not be a full-blown mental illness, but can still cause dysfunction, and sometimes can even be considered mental illness. Like, I'm sure you all have heard the word trauma before. Trauma, right? So there's this concept called intergenerational trauma. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. So what intergenerational trauma is, trauma that somebody experienced, like a great-great-grandpa or someone experienced some trauma, and it actually changes DNA. There's this little particle, like parts of our DNA, that when we go through trauma, it actually changes, so then our children and their children and their children also can be affected by this. And this is something that's relatively new for studying in scientific studies, but there are studies out there that have followed through with this and have seen the effects of intergenerational trauma. And it's not just genetics, it's not just our DNA. It can also, we could also argue, like, the way that we are raised, often there's similarities, and so sometimes we don't just pass trauma down through genetics, but also through our behaviors as well. And that's, and our behaviors can actually solidify that trauma if we're doing things that are harmful to our children. And so it's really interesting stuff, and it's really dense stuff. So I'm sorry, I might be getting too detailed. I think of it like if you've ever had ugali, right? If you've ever eaten ugali versus salad, ugali is really dense and it doesn't take much before you're really full. But salad, oh man, I could eat like bowls full of salad and still be hungry because it's light. So when I get into some of the stuff, it's really dense, heavy kinds of things to talk about, in my opinion, and sometimes it feels like splitting hairs, to use a phrase. Like, you know, hairs are really like tiny, right? So when we try to split it, like it's really what do you call it? It's kind of annoying, right? But anyway, I digress. I'm sorry, I'm going off where I don't need to. Just kind of distracted here. But anyway, I was talking about trauma. So the goal of being aware that there's intergenerational trauma, that it's passed down through our DNA, that it can also, we also can behave similar to our parents and their parents and so on. So basically what I'm saying is we're all responsible for our narrative. We're all responsible for passing down whatever we're passing down to our children. So there's a saying, something like, we're not responsible for, like, we might not have caused, got a notification. We might not have caused the bad things in our childhood. However, we are responsible for dealing with them, for dealing with whatever we went through in our childhood. So if we went through some horrible experience when we were kids, and we weren't the ones who gave ourselves this horrible experience, we still got to deal with the aftermath. So if you have dysfunctional behaviors and you have children, even if you don't have children, but especially if you have children, then don't you all want to fix that so they don't also have to deal with that in their life? And it's easier said than done. It's way easier said than done because, first of all, we have to be aware that we're doing things that are not helpful. People who have gone through trauma often do something, it's called being, there's a word, it's called dissociate. What is dissociation? It is where somebody's in a situation, like somebody who's been, say they've been beaten on a regular basis, abused, physically abused. So when somebody is being physically abused, they will, in order to cope with that abuse, they'll often dissociate, which is to say they'll check out. They will be somewhere else. Maybe in their mind, they're sitting on a cloud somewhere in outer space. They're not being abused. They're sitting off by themselves in a cloud in outer space, thinking about something totally different. That's dissociation. Not being present where you are in the moment. Completely checking out. So for people who have gone through trauma and have a habit of dissociating, sometimes they could be doing poor behaviors, ineffective behaviors that could be harmful to themselves or other people without realizing it because maybe they're dissociating. So to be aware is the first step. To be aware and saying, you know what? When I do this, when I yell at my kids, say, for example, when I yell at my kids to go to bed, that's not a helpful behavior. Because now my cortisol is a stress hormone that our body makes. So my adrenaline glands, our adrenaline fight or flight response is activated because I'm yelling at my kids, go to bed, it's your bedtime, why are you still awake? And now they're awake too, for example. Now their fight or flight response is activated and their adrenaline's pumping through their body because they're like, something like we need to defend ourselves because, you know, they're hyped up. For example, instead of doing that, make it something that is pleasant and relaxing and calm. So, and as a parent who has children, sometimes it can be stressful, right? When they're not listening, say. Time to go to school and the kid doesn't have his shoes on. He's perfectly capable of getting his shoes on by himself. Why don't you have your shoes on? All right, there's a time and place to be loud and get their attention. And there's also time and place where that is ineffective and it's not going to help get them moving any quicker. So that's what I'm saying. Like, when we're aware, and maybe those are poor examples. There's a million examples out there. When we're aware of what we are doing, what we are saying, the tone of voice that we have in which we're saying it, and not just how it's coming out, but also how that other person is hearing us. They don't just hear our words. Other people don't hear only our words. They're also actually, people hear with their eyes first. As long as we're able to see. Most people can see. I'm talking in generalizations because most people in the world have the ability to see. So if you see with your eyes and you hear with your ears, we hear with our eyes before we hear with our ears. Body tones, our posture, the way we're coming across that way, and then the level of our speech, how we are communicating. It says just as much as the words that we choose to say. So I really, really just want to encourage you to think about when you're communicating, if you have children especially, but if you're communicating with anybody, how is it that you think maybe they hear what you're saying? Because they don't only hear your words, they hear your tone of voice and they see your body language also. Those are really important. And there's a lot of people who have gone through trauma or have intergenerational trauma and have maladaptive, bad behaviors that are ineffective, that are not helpful, and are simply not aware. So I just beg of you to be aware of how you're interacting with other people and ask yourself, how are they hearing what I have to say? How are they interpreting my words, my tone of voice, my body language? And maybe that will help us to be better communicators and more effective in trying to get along with our fellow humans. So that's what I have for today. I know there's a lot of things I have that I want to say still, so I will try to do a video. I was aiming for once a week, but that's realistically, that's not enough. If I try for once a week, I'm probably not going to get there. But if I try for more often, maybe 3 to 4 times a week, maybe even once a day, we'll see. But just keep looking for more content, and please comment, because when you guys comment, then I can know what it is you're looking for, and that really helps for me to be able to get more content to you guys. And we'll catch you next time, and hope you all are doing well. And okay, we'll see you next time. Bye.